My great pleasure now to introduce Linda Brown. Linda is the Chief Executive of Laureate Australia and New Zealand, and I'd like particularly to acknowledge that this keynote speaker is sponsored by the VET Development Centre, and invite you to pick up and look at carefully the content on the seats of your chair. Linda became Chief Executive of Think Australia on 1 May 2013 and led the tertiary education provider through its acquisition by Laureate International Universities. Laureate, if you don't know, is a very large network of universities, campuses around the planet. They actually cover over 1 million students in the Americas, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Laureate within Australia includes Torrens University, Australia, one of the new universities, Think Education, and also the Blue Mountains International Hotel Management School. Linda has more than 23 years of management experience in the education sector in Australia and the United Kingdom. And prior to joining Laureate, Linda was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Director of TAFE at Swinburne Uni and in Melbourne, and before that was an executive in the Queensland Public Service. So it's my delight to invite you to present Driving Student Employability, Responding to the Challenges Facing Australian VET. Thank you very much.
Hi, morning. How are we doing? We good? I always feel bad following Scott because he's just so damn passionate about education. So hopefully I can bring half of that to the discussion we're going to have this morning. But it was really interesting because I was sitting there reflecting about leadership. And not just leadership of organisations, leadership of systems. You know, Scott's very honest about the journey that CQU went through. Where it lost its mission, it lost its purpose around the split between international and domestic students. And through phenomenal leadership and a phenomenal team, got that back on track really, really quickly. I was also reflecting, because I was blessed that last week I was in Aspen, as you do. And it's a great thing about working for a global company. And I was actually with a lady called Dr. Judith Rubin, who used to be, she was the first female president of a Ivy League university in Australia, Penn University. And she also was the CEO of the Rockefeller Foundation. And she runs our global academic board. And she's just written a book on resilience. And we were blessed, there was 4 of us with her, and we got a couple of hours with her just in discussion. And one of the things she said around resilience and around the world was to never waste a good crisis. I don't think it was her quote. I think she stole it from somebody else. But I think if there was ever a time to reflect on that, you know, it's now, isn't it, in the vet sector. And, you know, I've been quite below the radar for the last 2 years, which is really important to us. We've come into Australia. We're building the first new university in 20 years. We're doing it very quietly. We're doing it very well. We're making sure our students get good, solid outcomes. We're not shouting about it. So why have I come today? Because, you know, we could have gone and spoken at lots of different conferences over the last couple of years and intentionally have turned that down. It's really important today. And what you do is really, really important because we have to get the trust back. And the way that we're going to get the trust back for VET in Australia is through evidence and is through research and is actually starting to do exactly what Scott talked about in his journey with CQU, is get our purpose back and is to actually look at vocational education, not just about being about access, which it is, but also making sure it's about employability. And that's something that we should be really proud of. We should be really, really proud that vocational education is there to help productivity, to help the economy, to help people get jobs. And I really take my hat off to you guys, because the more that you can do, the more evidence you can show, the more you can show the differentiation of purpose between vocational education and higher education. I think we have a chance to get that trust back and to get the sector back on track. So my challenge to you is, let's not waste a good crisis, and let's get the evidence right, and let's get this country back on track. I'm just quickly going to go through this. Laureate International Universities, we have over 1 million students. Out of those 1 million students, probably 10 to 15% of them are vocational education students, and I'll share some of the innovative things that we're doing around the world as we wander through this conversation. But we own all 88 universities. So really we're just in the process of being good at being big. The 88 universities were kind of run like a federation, a group of institutions that kind of all had egocentric people like me who ran countries and really did our own thing in our own country. But we're now, for the first time, actually working out how can we pool that together, how can we learn from each other across the world, and how can we start to drive a really serious education agenda moving forward. Our mission absolutely has been our mission, and there's so many parallels between CQU and Laureate. It's unbelievable. We are what we call a public benefit corporation. We're here for good. And to be a public benefit corporation, we're the biggest one in the world now. We actually give away over $700 million a year in scholarship support to developing countries. We give, and we make no apology for that, $60 million a year to the Clinton Global Initiative. We tend to be all over the press at the moment in the States because of the election. And we also run the International Youth Foundation. So we absolutely have a Here for Good mission at the heart of our organisation. It's critical, we're measured on it, it's our absolute purpose. And it's really interesting bringing that agenda into Australia. We're about to go really, really large in global public health in Australia. We're about to do something incredibly sexy in Queensland that will be announced in the next couple of months, and it isn't a medical school. It's much more practical than that. We're actually partnering with a really, really large aged care private provider who's going to build me a street under some aged care units, and we're actually going to look at a kind of living lab research centre around residential care and aged care. Nowhere near here, Scott, so we're not competing.
We're everywhere, so you probably...
Oh, that's true, actually. I might get you in as an extra campus. But really, really important, because what I'm going to talk to you today is really about industry immersion, not industry engagement. And you hear a lot of conversation from, universities, TAFEs, private providers about partnering with industry. But really, I don't build a campus unless it's in industry and actually sitting in industry. The same way as Scott's strategy is around being in community. And I think you've got to be true to your mission, and I think that's a differentiator moving forward. As I've said, when our students and graduates succeed, nations prosper and societies benefit. And genuinely, the only KPI that I have as the CEO of Laureate Australia and New Zealand is my graduate employment rate. That's one thing I'm measured on. And at the moment, we've now, as you know, got Think Education, the 8 colleges, and are building the university. It sits about 80%, but my job is to get it up to 90, 95% in the next 12 months. So that's a big, big ask. So I want to take you through that journey, and I want to take you through that journey of employability. It was really interesting because when I looked at your conference title, when I came back yesterday from the States, No Frills, that really, really means to me, and I know we'll all have our own interpretation, let's just let vet be vet. You know? Let's stop trying to be higher education, or let's stop trying to be something else. In the same way that Scott redirected CQU and their mission to be absolutely about access and those amazing, amazing values, vet and higher ed in this country has absolutely lost its way. We have universities who are now trying to be vet providers. We have vet providers who are trying to be universities. We have loan systems for vet students that are based on a higher education premise. We've actually lost the purpose of vocational education and training. And I'll be a little bit more political, or probably back up Scott's political comments earlier. We're now talking about having polytechnics as well, which will be a mix of both in the middle, and it'll be a bit of TAFE and a bit of higher ed and a bit of something else. So I think we've really got to go back to fundamentals. We've really got to go back to what VET is about, and we've got to stop driving people up the food chain to get access to loans, to get access to education. Why would we not have a VET fee help scheme for people who actually need Cert 2s, 3s and 4s to get a job? Yeah? Because to be quite honest, we created the crisis ourselves. We created the crisis because we said that the only bit that was worth the government funding was diplomas. And therefore, you know, this horrible, horrible situation happened where people went out and abused that and put people up the food chain far too quickly that couldn't do the qualifications. So I think we really need to get back to what our knitting's about. Affordability is crucial. An access agenda, affordability is crucial. So we do need to sort out this loan system. But one of the discussions that we're having, and it actually happened in the States, because this isn't new. 6 years ago, there was a crisis in the States around private providers coming in and abusing a loan system. Yep. And the way they actually dealt with that is they drove the whole agenda to an outcome-based agenda. They drove the whole agenda to an employability agenda. They only funded areas where they knew that people could get jobs, and people then would be able to pay the loans back. And even more importantly, and I really genuinely believe that this should happen in Australia as well, they made the providers responsible for making sure that people got jobs and had the opportunity to get jobs. So what they actually did with the loans in America was created a thing called provider default. And the provider had to ensure that over 80% of their students got employed and then earned a salary that then allowed them to pay the loan back. That suddenly redirects your focus. It suddenly redirects your focus to make sure that vet is vet and that we're helping people get jobs appropriately. And I don't disagree with Scott. I think we need education as well, okay, because it's really, really important. But that's why we've got lots of different players, because there's a time for education's sake, and there's a time for education for employment's sake. And I think we've kind of lost that someplace in the middle, and that's going to be critical moving forward. Next, in 2 weeks' time, I go to Peru, and every year we actually were blessed as Laureate, and we got $150 million from the World Bank, the biggest ever investment from the World Bank in an education company, to create a global research platform that actually looks at youth futures. And we've actually set up the first research centre in Chile and in Peru, and I'm hoping to bring that to Australia in the next 12 months. And what that actually does is starts to connect the policymakers, the government, with the students, with industry, to actually look at how do we change the agenda? How do we make sure that employability in some form is at the heart of what we do for productivity and futures moving forward? So I'm really looking forward to hopefully bringing that conference to Australia in the next 12 months. So access is important. But again, it's fit for purpose access. If you're a vocational education provider, you can have an access mission. You need to be really clear about that, and you need to be clear, as Scott said, when that's about general education and getting people up to a certain level or a certain standard. And then you need to be clear if you've got an employability agenda. Okay? And not everybody needs to have the same things. So across most of the government jurisdictions globally that we operate, it's really, really interesting. In some of the countries that we operate in, they don't even recognize vocational education and training, which is incredible. Even if you look at China at this point in time, there's kind of a very low-level murmuring at this point in time about how to build a vocational education and training system. But they are starting to invest, and they're starting to invest in skills. And it's not only lower-level skills, they're actually starting to invest in higher-level skills. One of the things that we're going to do next year is create, in partnership with Merkel and in partnership with Condi Rice and the Chinese government, the first ever higher education vocational university in Shanghai. Sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? But it's not. They're actually going to build a university around entrepreneurship, okay, in partnership with us. And it's going to be based on competency-based training. It's going to be based on vocational training, yeah, but it's going to go right up to professional doctorates. So when I talk about VET and I talk about employability and how we drive employability, it's not just Cert 2, 3, and 4s and the diplomas, we also need to get our act together to look at higher level vet and to actually weave that into the makeup of our institutions or our universities going forward. We've got friends from Europe here, I heard, in the welcome. You know, if we look at Germany and the German system, we all know that the German system has a parity between vocational education and higher education. And I think when we think about employability, we really need to think about it in a different way. When I was at Swinburne, I used to get my knickers in a twist because the stats used to show that 29% of people who had degrees used to come back and do vocational education and training. They used to come back and do certificates, and they used to do diplomas to try to get a job. And I used to get really head up about that. And if you heard me talking at that point in time, I thought this was disgusting. And we had to get people in a linear manner up the chain, and they should be able to do it after they had their degree. But actually, more and more, as I start to see this crisis unfold, it actually makes sense. You know, I could have the best degree in engineering. It isn't going to make me a good nurse. And I might have to come back and do a diploma or a certificate to get these skills. So we need to really think about the employability matrix, and therefore, is it okay to jump about around the qualification framework? And therefore, how do we make sure that people do that at institutions or at organizations that then support their working ability? Okay? But again, we have to create parity. We have to actually show that we can, you can do that in a vocational way and you can do that in a higher education way. And it's just different. It just has a different purpose. And I think what you can help us do is really, really make that purpose visible. One of the things I'm really shocked about is when I started digging and started to look at employability statistics and started to look at employability statistics within Australia and look at those for universities and look at those for TAFEs, I would have expected that there would have been a much higher level of employability from TAFEs and VET than there would be from universities. That's not the case. There's not an enormous differential in any shape or form. And should we be comparing them? So really we have to dig into our research and dig into the data to find out what's going on. Yeah? Have we both lost our purpose, and how do we redefine that moving forward? So the ROI for students for me in vocational education and training is a job, is employability. So how do I do that within my own organisation, since the most important target that I've got is this 90% plus for employability? We did the biggest survey of students globally, and it was published last year by Zogby, which had over 25,000 students from around the world talk about what they wanted from education, talk about what skills they needed. We've worked with over 2,000 employers to actually say what skills they want from people who are educated as well. And we've really published that. And what we're doing is we're starting to look at our curriculum, starting to look at our course design, starting to look at our premises, and think about it in a different way. I say really clearly, we didn't get the license to build the 40th university in Australia to look like the other 39. We actually got it to build a university around applied research and employability. And what does that mean? That means that we will have, not campuses, but we will have hubs of activity that sit within industry. If you go to the design campus in Ultimo in Sydney, it sits within a building that has some of the best design companies in it, and the students feel like they go to work every day. You would not know it was a university campus. If you look at our health clinics at this point in time, we put about 7,000 people through them every single year. They're sitting on a high street or sitting beside community housing. And again, we've actually got people who are self-employed renting space in there, or incubator units in there, making sure that industry is at the centre of all that we do. Some of the more contentious things that we've done, not like me to be contentious, but some of the more contentious things we've done by way of a university is we've brought in the most amazing promotions policy that actually equally promotes phenomenal applied researchers, amazing teachers, or industry stars. And we've actually made sure that that progression up through the hierarchy of academia is recognised equally. And that's really important. I had a beautiful fight with TEXA when I first came in to start the university, when I said it was going to be our purpose to have 80% of our academics as working practitioners. We actually, through our purpose, see some of you going, oh yeah, I'd like to take that one on. You know, we want people to be relevant, and the best way for people to be relevant is for them to actually be working in industry at this point in time. A fight that people said we would not win. But actually our students get it. That's why they come. They come for the industry stars as much as they come for the star academic. We've made sure that our facilities are the best in the country. Even to hospitality, we took over Rockpool, Neil Perry's restaurant, and we actually opened that in Sydney. It's 48 out of 4,000 in Sydney on TripAdvisor. It's a high quality, go to work place. And we've made sure that the industry immersion, not industry engagement, is at the centre of all we do. The same as Scott, we make sure that everybody goes to work. I don't care if you're working now. You might be working self-employed, you might be working for a small to medium-sized enterprise, but you have to do work experience with us as part of your program, because we want to make sure you've got the range of work to be able to go out and really make a difference. So I think the important thing for us is around mission, is around purpose, and our mission very, very clearly at Laureate is around employability, because we genuinely believe that when our students are employed and when they are here for good and they make, you know, have a social difference, all of our students have to do a social entrepreneurship project, we will actually make societies prosper. So there's a lot of parallels between Scott and his mission and CQU, and knowing who you are and not trying to be somebody else. But my challenge to you is, let's not waste a good crisis. And let's get vet back where vet should be, which is at the centre of productivity, the centre of employment, and let's make this country great again. Thank you.
Thank you for that delightful challenge, which now should elicit delightful questions. So please ask your questions.
I've got a background in vet and employment services.
Where are you from?
I'm at the moment from Resources Meeting and Skills Alliance,
Okay.
and I also work for National Industry Skills Council for Building, Mining and Civil Construction for about 4 years as a technical management and training institute. So through that I've got a lot of experience with a lot of RTOs. And I guess I just want to make the comment that there are a lot of RTOs doing brilliant work in the vet sector, and they're not necessarily paid. In fact, the majority of them aren't. And that they are engaging very well with the industry, but also they just act as a comment, because they do get slaved off, and there are a lot doing a really dodgy job, I get that. But also, I just wanted to know your views. The vet sector services more than employment needs. It actually is part of what it does is engagement, like getting people who are a long distance from work readiness or a long distance from being in a position to go to work because their parents or because there are other contributing factors, or they're in regional areas where employment opportunities are very low. So how do you see that fitting with, if we focus on employment outcomes, which VET does do, it's about competency framework and achieving competency, but also that service that VET provides of giving people an entrance to a pathway towards employment. So the first qualification they do might not lead to a job outcome, but it's getting them engaged in that pathway.
I think they're equally valid. What I'm saying is make them differentiate. You know what I mean? So there's obviously, there's the access mission where you're bringing people in, you're getting them up to a certain standard that then they can go on a pathway to employment. Absolutely. Not everybody's good at that. And you've got to be really, really clear about what the outcome is at the end and what the promise is at the end. I think, and I wouldn't say that's everybody's mission. It takes a different type of skill set, a different type of competency, a different type of lecturer or academic to nurture and support that type of delivery. And I think there are community groups out there, there's community services out there, there's private providers out there, there's states out there who do that extremely well. I think what I found in looking at Australia is we can't all be good at everything. So I suppose my call out is really pick your purpose and go for it and do it really damn well. So there's some people who can do 3 or 4 or 5 things. It tends to end up in mission creep, and what happens is nobody does anything very well. So I think, I hate to go back to the past, but I absolutely loved it when I first came to Australia, which was 12 years ago. We had all the kind of ACE provision, the community service provision. And then we had VET, which was very much focused on everything up to Cert 4, and then we had universities. And I think that it can work in partnership, especially if you're community-based. You can build a bridge across all of that. But you need to have a really clear mission and purpose to be able to do that. I think Scott does that, and I think CQU does that. That's not our space. Our space is very much about employability, and very much about employability into the professional workforce. And we would be disastrous at supporting that level of client, and people do it much better than us. So I think what I'd say is just people need to actually work out what they're good at and let other people do stuff that they're not good at. And then
They'll get funding from somewhere.
Can I just respond to the first part of that? Because I think that was perhaps aimed at the same guy. Language is really powerful, and I'm sorry if I said dodgy RTOs. What I try and say is dodgy providers, because there are dodgy providers out there, and I've seen some TAFEs do some dodgy things, and I've seen universities do some really dodgy things. So it's all the dodgy, but it must be difficult to be a real quality private RTO, and we know there's some really great ones out there, because everyone does seem to get brushed with that thing. So I meant dodgy providers of all persuasions.
Hi, my name's Jerry. I run an organisation for long-term unemployed disadvantaged youth in Brisbane. I'm just wondering how we might be able to have some input into your research around your youth futures down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to go into Peru and have a look and see what they're actually doing there in the next month. And then I was speaking to NCVER about how we can pull something back into Australia that will actually, give organisations like yours a voice and visibility when we do that, because it will be on behalf of the impact. Really interesting when you go global, because you and I know what the problem is here, yeah, and we know the challenge that's here. And I was blessed with being with Queensland Government for 4 or 5 years, where I really saw it, because I sat in a strategic leadership group for universities, TAFE and schools. But it's amazing the rest of the world doesn't see it. So when I was there pitching for that 2 weeks ago, they were like, we don't need that in Australia, Linda. We just actually purchased Monash South Africa. We're doing a lot of work in South Africa around an African agenda for education. And I'm saying, actually, we really do. So I think this is going to be really, really powerful if I can get that to come to Australia, because it'll be the first time that the rest of the world actually wakes up and realises we have a problem. But it would absolutely be my intention to work with local providers and give them a voice and a global stage to actually look at youth futures and jobs.
I was about to say it would also be a good idea to come to look at Zealand, because we're doing quite a lot of stuff in that space. It's a bit
I just got New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, so they just gave me New Zealand as well as Australia about 8 weeks ago. And it's really interesting to watch the government policy there and what's happening there. I can't promise that. But you can come across a tip. That'll be fine.
Linda,
Yeah.
what's your view on developing transferable skills and knowledge that will empower people to move from one job to another job, from one industry sector to another?
Critical. My guys, I'm so proud of my guys. My guys just won the Global Award for Innovation from Laureate out of 1 million students. And what they won it for is we've done 2 pilots. We've done a pilot called Delta, which is out in the market at this point in time, where we're actually working with key employers to give people who've already been educated an opportunity to get work experience and soft skills and get them accredited. Look it up, it's really sexy, it's really cool. And the second thing is we've created a thing called the Laureate Professional Assessment. It's got Raspberry and Gallup and all the key people across the world who've designed this tool. And this tool, we actually worked with the 2,000 employers to work out what are the skills, the transferable skills that you need globally, and how do we endorse them and actually evaluate them and accredit them in a way that employers understand, not in a way that academics understand. So we've created this global tool that will then be rolled out over the next 6 months. And it's critical. We all know of it, and we've all been educators, thank God. employability skills, you've got graduate learning attributes, you've got this, that, and the other, and they don't mix across. It's really, really important that all students go out with what I call the triple threat. They go out with the best graduate knowledge that they possibly can in their discipline, and hopefully some of that liberal arts as well around learning that Scott was talking about. They also go out with social good for us, same here, that they go out with a social entrepreneurship streak and they know how they give back. And then the third thing for me is that they have accredited transferable skills, soft skills that employers understand, so that they can really start to compare, team building, resilience, all that amazing stuff that we all need to be able to go to work. So I think it's critical.
So how does your immersion in industry process facilitate that?
Because the way that we have the employer writes a reference or evaluates the soft skills while they're doing the work for the employer. And our industry immersion is not just Australia-based. So we have students who do public health, working with the students in South Africa, working with the students in South America. And we actually employ or give, credos to employers or industries to come in and help that project management and therefore assess the students and give them validation against those skills. It's major. It's complicated and it's bloody hard, but it's absolutely worth it for the student. And that's putting the employer at the centre, isn't it, rather than on the outside. Can I ask you a question? Is there any statistics anywhere that show that VET students have a higher degree of employability when they finish their course in higher education?
If you look at the graduate outcome surveys recently from higher ed versus, for example, the student outcome survey around apprentices in particular, and you look at 6 months downstream of their graduation and whether they've got a job and how much they're earning, you'll find that the present values of the graduate outcome surveys are dipping.
Yeah.
And VET has sustained, in that area at least, some excellent outcomes, so that salary and likelihood of having a job is still fairly good, but it's kind of cascading into the two. I think
there is a flaw in that argument because in this region, halfway through their training, you sack the apprentices, so they never get to graduate. There's a complete, so there is a flaw. I mean, when someone comes here to, let's say, be a radiographer, I was a radiographer. We enter into a contract, come here for 3 years, you work out, pass your exams, we give you work experience, at the end of it you'll be a radiographer. Now they might not go and get a job. We can't enter into the same contract with an apprentice because basically we say they go and get a job as an apprentice, halfway through the company goes broke and they're screwed because they can't finish their apprenticeship. So, okay, the job outcomes might be good after graduation, but a lot of the apprentices are not into graduation.
And anything between 40 to 60% completion rates, so there is that complement who tragically lose their jobs.
Get screwed.
And just as a small interest to me, because my interest is out of South Australia historically, and I was frankly always a personal champion of group training organisations for the very reasons that they serve an excellent niche in the right way. And the funding fell over because partly, and I'm not having a pick at New South Wales now, but because they didn't want to continue. And it's great interest to me to see an announcement out of the New South Wales government a couple of weeks back, reigniting some of that space yet again. So the brokers in the field have actually placed people back into these jobs, I think is absolutely critical. But you're right in that sense. So,
and I have no issue with students funding their own education. No issue at all, as long as it's fair, transparent, they know what they're getting at the end, and they actually have the ability to pay back what they've borrowed. And that's where we need to become more sophisticated, rather than do what we did, which was appalling, and that led to all the abuse of the students. So I think that, your job is really important in making sure that we know where the jobs are, we know where employability is, we know where students can invest in the future, and then it's up to people like us to re-gear our organisations so we give people the best possible chance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda, and to Scott for bringing your time of day today to us. So I much appreciate both of it. A really rich start to the session of No Frills. A couple of housekeeping things I'd like to just announce. One is we'll be having tea outside, subject to the weather, and if somebody opens the door, we'll work that out. So hopefully that's all good. There will be posters out there, and I do invite you to have a look at those posters. There are many and very interesting posters, and I appreciate you having a look at those. The authors have gone to great effort to present and think through those. There's a People's Choice Award. You might have a voting slip, another one. Put on your hand, and please fill that in. The other matter I want to just raise with you is at Glenmore tonight, when we have our dinner, it is a cash-only bar. So make friends now if you need to, because unfortunately you won't have an FPOS facility at that location, but it will be cash. The tea break now goes to about 40 minutes, and the concurrent sessions, I think, start at 10:45 in the various locations in your program. So thank you so much, and enjoy your morning tea.